Good evening, America. Before we unpack today's historic Supreme Court showdown, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happened in the nation's highest court today marks a pivotal moment in American constitutional law. This afternoon, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson delivered what many legal experts are calling one of the sharpest and most decisive judicial counterarguments in recent Supreme Court history, dismantling former President Trump's legal claim to presidential immunity within moments of oral arguments beginning. This wasn't just another court session or routine ideological dispute. What unfolded today strikes at the very foundation of American democracy. The question of whether any person, even a former president, can ever be completely shielded from criminal accountability for actions taken while in office. To grasp the weight of today's hearing, understand this. Justice Jackson didn't merely challenge Trump's argument. She exposed how fundamentally it clashes with the Constitution itself, leaving seasoned legal observers momentarily stunned. The precision of her questioning made it clear that at least some justices recognize Trump's claim for what it is: an attempt to place the presidency above the law. Here's how it happened. During arguments over whether Trump is entitled to absolute immunity for actions taken as president, Justice Jackson listened as his attorney presented an extraordinarily broad interpretation of presidential power, one that would effectively remove presidents from all legal accountability. Then came the moment that defined the day, in what court analysts described as a surgical and devastating move. Justice Jackson posed a single hypothetical that instantly revealed the extreme nature of Trump's legal theory. She asked, "Under your theory of absolute immunity, could a president order the military to assassinate a political rival and still face no criminal consequences?" The attorney hesitated, attempted to evade, but Jackson pressed further, forcing him to concede that yes, under their interpretation, such an act could be protected if claimed as an official duty. Think about that. In open court, Trump's legal team effectively argued that a president could commit murder and still be immune from prosecution. Justice Jackson didn't stop there. She then methodically traced the logical consequences of that claim, demonstrating that it would create an unchecked presidency, one indistinguishable from a monarchy, where a leader could commit any crime, as long as it could be linked to official duties. She reminded the courtroom that America's founders explicitly rejected monarchy and built a system ensuring no one, not even the president, stands above the law. What made this exchange extraordinary wasn't only the content of her argument, but the way she delivered it. Instead of the long, winding hypotheticals typical of Supreme Court debate, Jackson's questioning was clear, concise, and inescapable. In less than 2 minutes, she compelled Trump's defense to openly endorse a vision of presidential power that resembles dictatorship, not democracy. This moment didn't happen in isolation. For months, Trump's legal team has been promoting increasingly extreme interpretations of presidential immunity in multiple courts, seeking to delay or derail criminal trials by arguing that a president cannot be prosecuted for anything done while in office. But today marked a turning point. This time, they faced a justice ready to lay bare the true consequences of that argument in plain, unmistakable terms. Now, imagine this: a Supreme Court justice dismantling an entire legal theory with one precise question. After months of preparation, Trump's attorneys found themselves unable to offer any meaningful limit to their claim. No principle that would stop their theory from justifying even presidential murder. That's not a small flaw in legal logic. It's a profound misunderstanding of the foundational values of American democracy. The courtroom's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Observers noted that several justices appeared visibly uneasy once Justice Jackson exposed the full implications of Trump's position. Even Justice Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by Trump himself, began pressing for clarity, asking whether there were any boundaries to the immunity Trump was asserting. In a matter of moments, the tone of the hearing shifted completely. From a technical legal debate to a defining confrontation between democratic accountability and unchecked power. Justice Jackson's questioning carried unique weight because of who she is and what she represents. As the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, she brings an acute understanding of how absolute power has historically been used to deny justice and evade responsibility. Her line of questioning reflected not only deep legal insight, but also a lived awareness of how unchecked authority has been weaponized against the vulnerable throughout America's history. Moments like this are rare. Seasoned court observers struggled to recall another instance where a single exchange so completely dismantled a litigant's position. Jackson's precision didn't just undercut Trump's immunity argument. It exposed its danger in the clearest possible terms. At its core, this debate is about far more than abstract constitutional theory. It's about the real, world consequences of accepting a doctrine that would place presidents above the law. Justice Jackson's questioning transformed those implications from theoretical to undeniable, illustrating how Trump's position, if accepted, would reshape American democracy into something the nation's founders would never have recognized. According to leading constitutional scholars present at the hearing, Jackson's intervention may well have been the defining moment that determines the outcome of this case. Put simply, she made it nearly impossible for any justice committed to democratic principles to accept Trump's argument without also endorsing the notion that a president can commit crimes without consequence. Think about that. When a Supreme Court justice can so clearly expose the authoritarian core of a legal claim that even its proponents are left defenseless, it transcends a single courtroom exchange. It sets a precedent, a marker, for how America defines the rule of law itself. The way the court views the essential balance between executive authority and legal accountability. What set off this extraordinary exchange was Trump's attorney's claim that without absolute immunity, presidents could not effectively do their jobs, that they would constantly fear prosecution for actions taken in office. Justice Jackson's response cut through that argument effortlessly, pointing out that every other public official in the United States, from governors to mayors to law enforcement officers, manages to fulfill their duties while remaining accountable under the law. The presidency, she implied, should be no exception. And as we've seen repeatedly in Trump's legal defenses, this push for special treatment stems from one underlying belief that he should not be held to the same legal standards as everyone else. Jackson's questioning laid this bare, exposing the argument for what it truly is: a rejection of the core American ideal of equality before the law. The implications of today's exchange reach far beyond Trump's personal legal troubles. If the court adopts Jackson's framing, it would set a lasting precedent that no president, current or former, can evade criminal prosecution for unlawful acts, even those performed while in office. Such a decision would mark a clear and historic rejection of the so-called imperial presidency that some have tried to justify. It takes real courage for a Supreme Court justice to confront the broader consequences of a former president's arguments so directly, especially in a political climate where members of the judiciary face growing scrutiny and, at times, threats. Jackson's questioning wasn't just legal reasoning, it was a defense of constitutional democracy against those who would erode it. But there's another aspect of her performance that deserves recognition: her mastery of clarity. Jackson demonstrated that even the most complex constitutional debates can often be resolved by asking a simple, practical question. What would this actually mean in the real world? By forcing Trump's attorney to grapple with the real implications of absolute immunity, she stripped away the legal jargon and revealed the authoritarian logic beneath. And make no mistake, this wasn't spontaneous. Justice Jackson came fully prepared, armed with precisely formulated questions, designed to expose the weak points in Trump's argument. Her approach reflected not just brilliance, but discipline, not just intellect, but strategy. Typically, Supreme Court oral arguments are filled with lengthy hypotheticals and abstract theorizing, sometimes more focused on intellectual display than genuine clarity. Jackson took a different route, one centered on truth and understanding rather than performance. That leaves us with a critical question. Will the other justices follow her lead and acknowledge the dangers embedded in Trump's position? Because, if the court were to side with Trump's argument, despite Jackson's devastating critique, the consequences would ripple across the American legal system. Prosecutors would be left trying to determine which presidential actions are prosecutable and which are shielded by absolute immunity. Presidents could commit overtly criminal acts and then claim they were part of their official duties, effectively placing themselves beyond the reach of justice. In that scenario, the system would no longer be enforcing the law. It would be struggling to defend its very foundation. And that's what makes the timing of this confrontation so significant. Justice Jackson's intervention comes at a defining moment. A time when American democracy faces challenges from every direction, when the rule of law itself feels under siege, and when some openly seek to replace constitutional governance with unchecked power. Her questioning today went far beyond legal analysis. It was, at its core, a defense of democratic values against those who would erode them. The reactions from her fellow justices spoke volumes. Chief Justice John Roberts, who often prioritizes the court's institutional credibility, appeared visibly unsettled once Jackson laid bare the implications of Trump's argument. Justice Elena Kagan built upon Jackson's reasoning, pressing Trump's attorney to identify any limit to presidential immunity. Even among the conservative justices, there were clear signs of discomfort with the sweeping breadth of the claim being made on Trump's behalf. And here's the central takeaway. The hook. In an era where legal arguments are too often used to obscure rather than clarify, where complex theories are crafted to excuse simple wrongs, Justice Jackson's questioning cut through the noise. It was sharp, concise, and impossible to ignore. Because when a Supreme Court justice can dismantle a former president's entire legal defense with a single, well-constructed question, it becomes about more than courtroom debate. It becomes a demonstration of the power of truth to expose deception, of clarity to overcome confusion. This is not the story of partisanship or judicial activism. It is the story of a justice fulfilling the very purpose of the court: to test legal arguments honestly, to hold them to constitutional standards, and to expose their real-world implications. Jackson's approach reminded the nation that the Supreme Court, at its best, is not a political tool, but a guardian of constitutional democracy. Yet beyond the legal reasoning lies something deeper, a fundamental test of whether anyone in America truly stands above the law. For years, the public has watched powerful individuals appear to operate by a different set of rules, insulated by wealth, influence, or office. But today, that assumption was directly confronted. Justice Jackson's message was unmistakable. No one, not even a former president, is immune from criminal accountability. Because once presidents can break the law without consequence, democracy ceases to exist. When a chief executive can order violence or engage in corruption without fear of prosecution, the nation ceases to be a republic and slips into autocracy. And if the Supreme Court were ever to endorse such a claim, it would betray its most sacred duty, to uphold the Constitution. Jackson also underscored the hypocrisy in Trump's position. As she pointed out, Trump asserts absolute immunity for himself, while simultaneously arguing that his political rivals should be prosecuted for their official actions. This contradiction reveals the true motive behind his argument. Not the protection of the presidency, but the protection of himself. Something remarkable happened in that courtroom today. A relatively new justice, through deliberate preparation and clear reasoning, revealed the authoritarian essence of Trump's legal argument so thoroughly that even his own attorneys were left without a defense. In that moment, the system that many feared had been weakened beyond repair showed that it still has defenders. Individuals willing to confront dangerous legal theories and expose them for what they truly are. The American legal framework, tested by years of political pressure and assaults on its independence, proved, through Justice Jackson, that there are still guardians of constitutional democracy prepared to stand firm against its erosion. The story emerging from today's oral arguments is about far more than one case or one former president. It's about whether the Supreme Court will act as a bulwark against authoritarianism, or enable it by accepting arguments that place power above accountability. And in this moment, Justice Jackson has provided a clear example of what defending democracy looks like. For years, the legal system has faced pressure from those who believe authority should excuse misconduct, that the powerful are beyond the reach of law, and that democracy can be reshaped into a system where strength substitutes for justice. But today's proceedings could mark a turning point. A powerful reminder that at least some members of the court still grasp the stakes and are ready to uphold constitutional principles. The belief that no one is above the law is not an abstract concept. It is the foundation of self-government. The idea that presidents must obey the same criminal laws as every citizen is not persecution. It is accountability. And the expectation that the Supreme Court should reject arguments enabling presidential criminality is not partisan. It is patriotic. Tonight, as Trump's legal team works to contain the damage from Justice Jackson's incisive questioning, searching for a way to recover from the blow she delivered, we are reminded of something crucial. Truth carries power when spoken plainly. Legal arguments that appear complex or unassailable can collapse under clear, direct scrutiny. And sometimes, one justice, properly prepared and grounded in principle, can expose authoritarian reasoning for what it is. Because ultimately, the Supreme Court's legitimacy does not rest on political affiliations or the outcomes of individual cases. It comes from its commitment to apply the law fairly, to reject dangerous arguments, no matter who makes them, and to defend the Constitution even when doing so demands courage. I'm Rachel Maddow. And if you believe that no one, not even a president, should be above the law, if you agree that those who break it must face accountability like any other citizen, and if you believe the Supreme Court must resist arguments that would grant impunity to power, then make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Share this video with others, and stay informed about what's happening in our courts. Because democracy endures only when citizens understand the stakes, recognize authoritarian rhetoric for what it is, and support those, like Justice Jackson, who have the courage to defend constitutional truth. Today's arguments were about far more than law. They were about the survival of democratic governance itself. And in that courtroom, Justice Jackson showed us, unmistakably, what it means to stand up for it.